Clint Eastwood sat in the waiting room of the upscale medical center, his patience growing thin. He wasn't used to waiting long for anything, but today he had come for a routine checkup and had expected it to be a quick in-and-out visit. The sleek modern design of the hospital matched the affluent neighborhood it served. The receptionist had greeted him with polite professionalism, and the staff seemed more than capable. But the waiting room was packed, and the clock seemed to tick louder with each passing minute. Clint tried to focus on his thoughts, but it was hard to ignore the buzz of the place. After all, it wasn't every day that Clint Eastwood, one of Hollywood's most iconic stars, sat in a waiting room like any ordinary person. As he sat there, his mind wandered, and he couldn't help but notice the doctor who was about to enter the room, an unfamiliar face in the otherwise familiar environment. Dr. Thompson, a relatively young and confident man, walked into the room with a clipboard in his hand. He seemed professional, but there was something about his demeanor that didn't sit right with Clint. Without missing a beat, Dr. Thompson glanced over his list of patients and raised an eyebrow when his gaze landed on Clint. "Oh, I see," Dr. Thompson said, looking down at the list again, clearly unimpressed. "Hollywood? Well, I hope your visit doesn't take as long as a movie production. I'm sure the rest of us have more important things to do." Clint raised an eyebrow, surprised by the comment, but not letting it show. He had seen his fair share of arrogant individuals over the years, but never had one been so dismissive in his presence. Before Clint could respond, Dr. Thompson continued with a slight smirk. "Not every patient gets the star treatment, Mr. Eastwood, but I'll try to be quick. After all, we wouldn't want to keep the famous Clint Eastwood waiting too long, would we?" Clint Eastwood, never one to engage in petty arguments, kept his cool. He simply stared at the doctor for a moment, assessing the situation. There was a flash of annoyance in the young doctor's eyes, but Clint, true to his nature, did not rise to the provocation. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his voice calm but filled with a quiet intensity. "You're right, Doc," Clint said, his eyes not leaving Dr. Thompson's. "I'd prefer not to take up any more of your time than necessary, but I do expect a little bit more respect, especially when it comes to someone who's here for a checkup like anyone else." Dr. Thompson, momentarily taken aback by Clint's cool response, opened his mouth as if to retort. But before he could, Clint continued, "I've been in the business long enough to know how to handle criticism. I don't mind people thinking I'm just a Hollywood star, but what I don't tolerate is disrespect. I've earned the right to be treated like everyone else." The doctor's confident demeanor faltered slightly, but he quickly regained his composure, though the tension in the room was palpable. Clint stood up slowly, his gaze steady and unshaken. "I hope your patients get the kind of care they deserve, and maybe, just maybe, the next time you see a familiar face, you'll remember to treat them with the same respect you'd expect from others." With that, Clint turned to leave, but as he made his way toward the door, something caught his eye. The receptionist, who had been quietly observing the exchange, looked at Clint with recognition and a hint of surprise. As Clint moved toward the door, the receptionist stood up quickly, a look of concern flashing across her face. She had seen the entire exchange between Clint and Dr. Thompson, and it seemed that things were about to escalate. Before Clint could reach the door, she hurried over to him. "Mr. Eastwood, I apologize for the behavior of Dr. Thompson," she said, her voice filled with embarrassment. Clint gave her a reassuring smile. "It's fine," he said, his tone still calm. "I'm just here for a checkup like anyone else." The receptionist hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "Mr. Eastwood, I don't think you understand. This is your clinic. You own this place." Clint stopped in his tracks, his eyes widening slightly with surprise. "What?" he asked, his voice low but with a hint of amusement. "Yes, Mr. Eastwood," she said, lowering her voice as she glanced toward the hallway where Dr. Thompson had disappeared. "This is one of your medical centers. You established this clinic years ago. I'm sure Dr. Thompson didn't recognize you at first, but, well, he didn't realize who he was talking to." Clint stood still for a moment, processing the information. He had been running his own medical centers for several years, focusing on providing care to those in need. But it seemed Dr. Thompson had never made the connection. The thought of Dr. Thompson's earlier arrogance now seemed even more absurd. Clint took a slow breath, his mind working. "Well, I think we need to have a little chat with Dr. Thompson," he said, turning toward the receptionist. "Let him know that it's not just about the patients we treat here. It's about how we treat everyone with respect, regardless of who they are." Clint walked calmly down the hallway, the receptionist trailing behind him, clearly unsure of how to handle the situation. Clint's mind was made up. He wasn't going to let this slip by, especially in one of his own medical centers. He had worked hard to build the reputation of this place, not just for its quality of care, but for the values it represented: respect, integrity, and fairness. As he turned the corner, he saw Dr. Thompson standing by the nurse's station talking to another staff member. When the doctor noticed Clint approaching, he quickly straightened up, his earlier cockiness replaced by a nervous energy. Clint stopped in front of him, his presence commanding attention. "Dr. Thompson," Clint began, his voice firm but calm, "we need to talk." The doctor swallowed hard, clearly realizing the gravity of the situation. "Mr. Eastwood," he said, quickly, his voice trying to maintain some semblance of composure, I didn't recognize you earlier, and I apologize for my behavior. I never meant to be disrespectful." Clint's gaze never wavered, his tone steady. "It's not just about recognition, it's about respect. You can't treat people like that, regardless of who they are. Whether you recognize them or not, everyone deserves to be treated with courtesy." Dr. Thompson looked down, shame washing over him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Eastwood," he said quietly. "I was out of line." Clint nodded, his expression softening just slightly. "Apologies are a start, but they only go so far. What matters is how you treat people moving forward. If you want to work here, you need to understand that respect is not optional." The doctor nodded, a mixture of regret and understanding in his eyes. "I understand, and I'll do better, I promise." The conversation between Clint and Dr. Thompson was short but impactful. Clint's words had not been about vengeance or punishment. They were about teaching the value of respect, something that transcended all else in his eyes. Dr. Thompson, though initially defensive, had listened and understood the gravity of his actions. After Clint finished speaking, he gave Dr. Thompson a nod of acknowledgement. "I'll leave you to make it right," Clint said simply. "But remember, respect isn't just about avoiding mistakes, it's about actively treating people with dignity, no matter their role." Clint turned to leave, but before he did, he paused and looked over his shoulder at the doctor. "People are here to get better, to heal. And part of healing is making sure they feel valued, not just physically but emotionally. Keep that in mind." The doctor stood there for a moment as if processing every word. When Clint left the hallway, the receptionist, who had been watching from a distance, smiled quietly, seeing the change that was already beginning to take place. The weight of Clint's words was heavy, but it wasn't just Dr. Thompson who needed to learn something. It was everyone in the clinic. The next day, Dr. Thompson approached the cleaning staff, offering an apology to each of them personally. He had been humbled by the realization that it wasn't just about the medicine or the procedures. It was about the people, the ones who made everything work, from the nurses to the cleaners. Over time, Dr. Thompson became known for his respectful and thoughtful approach with patients and staff alike. And Clint? He went back to his quiet life, having made a difference in someone's world, once again proving that sometimes all it takes is a few words to change a person's perspective. Please subscribe to the channel for Clint Eastwood Respect. Thanks.